You're listening to In Cap We Trust for the Always Next Year Podcast Studio Network. You can find the team on our Twitter at ANY Podcast or on our website, www.alwaysnextyearpodcast.com. And now, to bring us in, the Jackdaws.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such eager my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of In Cap We Trust here at the Always Next Year Podcast Studios. I'm the host, Shane. I'm joined by Phillies Nation writer and Phillies sports Twitter almost legend, Jonny Heller. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. It's been a while since we've last talked. So each time that we have you on, we're going to talk kind of the state of the NL East. So it's something that we're always excited about. We're about 70 games in to the season, so we're rapidly approaching the midway point right now. So we got a lot of good stuff to talk about going in on this segment. But before we do, just going to talk a word real quick from one of our sponsors, Just Food. Treat yourself and take it home. Just Food is a catering service in Buckingham Green, and their address is you can mail them apparently, P.O. Box 501 in Hollicong, PA. So if you're in the Bucks County area just outside of Doylestown, it's just slightly past Peddler's Village if you're familiar with that. Again, catering service if you have weddings, birthday parties, outdoor catered events that you wish to have actual catered food. So we've actually had Rob cater a handful of things for us. So high-end food. They also have regular just barbecue food. I've never been displeased with anything from Just Food. So their phone number is 215-794-FOOD. Tell them Shane from ANYP sent you. Again, ask for Rob, and it is Just Food in Hollicong, PA. So, Jonny, we are 8 games over 500 at the 70-game mark right now, a game and a half out of first from Atlanta. Let's take a minute and kind of reflect on these first 70 games. It's been a bit of a whirlwind of a season. It's been incredibly difficult to actually have a pulse on the true identity of who and what the Philadelphia Phillies are. So let's talk some surprises so far. There's been a handful of good, and there's been a lot of bad. So let's start with some positive real quick. Who's been, or what has been, the biggest surprise to you so far through the first 70 games of this Philadelphia Phillies season?
All right, so the biggest surprise is that I'm going to name 3 guys who have been undoubtedly probably the most important pieces in helping the Phillies win games this year, and that's Zach Eflin, Scott Kingery, and Hector Neris. And I think if someone told me before the season started that those 3 guys would be contributing the most to this team, I would have said, all right, we're not winning games this year. But I mean, there's 2 sides to this, because if they're the best players, then means other guys are struggling, but all 3 have, I think, exceeded everyone's expectations. Eflin, he's always been a pretty efficient pitcher, but this year he's really put it together. He's got an ERA under 3. I think he's averaging like 6 1/3 innings per start, which is, I mean, coming from your 3rd or 4th starter, that's really, really impressive. He's actually right now, he's on pace to be the first Phillies pitcher since Cliff Lee in 2013 to average 7 innings or more per start at home. So I mean, I don't know about you. I've been pretty surprised and impressed by Eflin. And then Kingery. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. For me with Eflin, it's weird. I've always kind of looked at him as like, it's just, he's such not a sexy piece of that rotation, but all he does is produce, and this year he's found that perfect word of consistency. He really has, as you mentioned, put it together. He's controlling all of his pitches. He's super, super efficient, which with a bullpen like ours, I feel like that's probably his biggest strength right now to our team as a whole. He's going to get, you said he's averaging 6 1/3 innings this year, and at home, 7+. So that to give our very depleted pen that kind of a break and rest, that's absolutely huge. So while nothing about him is overly sexy and wow worthy, he has just been incredibly solid.
Yeah, and he's only 25, and I remember last year at the deadline there was a debate: would you throw him in a trade for Manny Machado? And while the easy answer seems like it would have been yes, now it's, I mean, thank goodness the Phillies kept a hold of him, because without him the rotation would be a complete mess. I mean, it's already kind of a mess, but he has been the one solid guy, while everyone else has been up and down. So next, Scott Kingery has just been ridiculous. I know you're a fan of. I know you've always been a big fan of Scott Kingery. I've been a fan of Scott Kingery, but I don't think anybody expected this.
No.
And obviously he was raking, and then he got hurt, and I think everyone expected, all right, he'll come back. It'll take him a little while to adjust. But I mean, he has not slowed down at all. And I think in the Red Series last weekend, he only had like 1 or 2 hits, and started to think, oh, maybe this is when he's going to hit a wall a little bit. And since then, he's been on an absolute tear. So, I mean, he's just been awesome. He's been hitting 400 since Kutch went down, which is really important. He's been playing center field every day. Last year, his exit velo was 85.5 miles per hour. This year, 90.2. So that's pretty unheard of. He's just hitting the ball hard. He's doubled his barrel percentage. Just a completely different player than we saw last year. So
I think a lot of it lends to the fact that they are truly letting him approach his ABs the way that what kind of made him successful in the minor leagues. I felt like last year they tried to make him fit this new age philosophy and what kind of Gabe Kapler and the Philadelphia Phillies envisioned their offense to be, someone to truly work pitchers and just get them out of games early with those high pitch counts. But they weren't necessarily, and have not been, kind of making those mistake pitches that are inevitably going to happen, make them pay for those. Scott Kingery this year has kind of moved back to his natural identity of, they always preach selectively aggressive. Scotty Kingery is almost Gene Segura-esque, where he's like, if the first pitch is there, I genuinely don't care, I'm swinging. Yeah, right. And I mean, like, he's not going to draw a lot of walks, but I mean, since I didn't realize he was hitting 400 since McCutchen went down. That's insane.
Yeah, his slugging percentage is 1,000 over that time.
I know, that I did know, which is absurd. From a future second baseman. But he's been incredibly impressive, and I'd be lying. And I mean, you said it. I've always been a very pro Scott Kingery, even through the slumps of last year and the difficulties of what he kind of encountered last year in a really hard rookie season. I did not foresee this in year 2. And every time that you think, hey, maybe he's going to kind of cool off a little bit and come back down to earth, just like you said in that Red Series, he comes back in that Arizona series and hits 3 home runs, and I think he walked away from the series with 6-7 hits, something like that, 5 of which were extra bases. So he has been a godsend to a very struggling offense right now.
Yeah, definitely, and he's been doing it playing different positions, which has been key.
Who knew?
Right.
Who knew?
Yeah. Yep. And then the last guy who's been a surprise, I think, for a lot of people, Hector Neris. I mean, where would the bullpen be without Hector Neris right now?
Oh, yeah.
He's been, other than that blown save the other night, I mean, that was going to happen eventually. He wasn't going to, right. But I don't even have words for it, because he was bad last year. I know he picked it up a little bit the second half of the year, but he was really bad, and I think a lot of people wrote him off. I kind of did, but he's just been absurd. And it's happy for him. I mean, I think his confidence probably took a hit last year, and it was probably pretty humbling. But to come back in this way, was very impressive.
I think that's the key word with Hector, and it's not unlike what it would be for Nick Pivetta. These guys are completely bred. Their success is bred on their confidence and just self-assuredness on the mound. And Hector last year, you can see it, and you saw it in the Atlanta game on Friday night. I had even tweeted about it. He has a different mound presence out there when he is not confident in his stuff, where you can just kind of tell, you can see it begin to unravel. And even if his stuff is good, which his stuff was not bad on Friday night, Atlanta just had an unbelievably smart approach against a guy who has one pitch. That was a game where you don't want to see a lot of fastballs from Neris, and Gabe has been on record saying that. That was a game where you needed to utilize more fastballs, in my opinion, to make them respect anything else. They were just waiting. They just said, go ahead, throw your split 10 times in a row. Until we get 2 strikes, I'm not swinging. And they just put really good swings on the ball, and that's really, really impressive. Like I said on Friday night, but the bounce back last night from him to go out there and have that 1-2-3 inning the night after throwing 25, 30 pitches and blowing a 2-run lead and a just demoralizing loss. Yeah. That's a different Hector. That's the Hector that where his confidence and self-assuredness kind of matches his talent level. He's been hands down the biggest surprise of the season for me, and I can't get enough.
Yeah, agreed. Yep.
So I think we're pretty much on pace. Those are, I think most Philly fans would agree. Those are the 3 biggest positive kind of surprises right now. So let's go and take a look at, just a handful of some of the things that are, underwhelming to you to this point that you probably would not have expected going into this season. I think we'll probably be pretty on par with this one as well. So why don't you go ahead and start us off?
All right. So the first thing I wanted to touch on was a lot of the moves that the Phillies made in this offseason were to kind of put together a lineup that wouldn't be streaky. And I think they also wanted to help, because Rhys Hoskins, obviously the biggest culprit, has always been a streaky hitter in his short time in the majors. And just putting together a lineup that wouldn't be so up and down. And the Phillies have not really been that. They've been very streaky. I think the only guy who was really consistent was McCutchen. He didn't hit for a high average, but he was always getting on base a lot, always working pitchers. So obviously him being out of the lineup has hurt, but you look at Hoskins, he had heading into May 8th, so that was the first 35, 40 games or so, he was just ripping the ball apart. I think his OPS was probably over 1,000.
We were all talking MVP Hoskins.
Yeah. Right. So from that, May 8th to June 9th, he hit 217 with 336 on base percentage and a 330 slugging percentage. Only had 7 extra base hits over that time. That's from your cleanup hitter over 30 games, 2 home runs, and stretches like that really, really hurt a team. If you have that in the middle of the lineup, it's hard to produce runs. Same thing, Cesar Hernandez. He got his average up to 310 on May 20th. Since then, hit 174, 217 on base percentage, and a 555 OPS. And he's been hitting leadoff since Andrew McCutchen went down. And stretches like that have really plagued this team. And Gene Segura has not. He's been very good, but he hasn't been super consistent. He's been pretty streaky. I mean, it's been up and down the lineup, and I think it's really, really hurt this team.
Yeah, I mean, look, anytime you sit there and you build a lineup, the way that we constructed this roster, we had no conceivable holes in terms of style of approach. You had your power guys in Harper and Hoskins. You had your contact guys such as Segura. You had your guys that were going to walk, and really work pitchers, which is truly up and down the lineup. And then you had just really good natural hitters like a JT Realmuto, and then your wild cards were kind of, what are you going to get from Franco? What are you going to get from Kingery? And then Odubel earlier on in the year. Yeah. And it's all just kind of gone astray. And it's so hard to put a finger on what those things are. Let me ask you this for 2 of the guys that you mentioned here. So we'll start with Hoskins. It is impossible to sustain any type of true winning success with a cleanup hitter with the kind of productivity. Now he's kind of come on in the last week or so. Yep. But prior to that, would you have made a move sliding him to either 5 or putting him in the 2 hole as he saw sometime last year, or are you pretty strong and let's let him work through this in the 4 spot?
Knowing the kind of player that he is, knowing that these stretches last this long, I might have moved him. The problem is who do you put in the cleanup hole? Do you put Harper there? Do you put Real Muto? I mean, I think it's a matter of who goes there if he's not. And the only thing during that stretch, he was still walking a lot. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know he was walking a lot and not striking out too much. So it's not like his presence was like just not there. I mean, he was still getting on base a little bit. But still, I mean, I definitely agree that production from the cleanup spot for a whole month, you can't just wait that out.
Yeah, I agree. I probably would have shifted him to 2, and not that Real Muto by any means would be my number one choice for any extended period of time in the 4 hole. Let's not forget several years back, Carlos Ruiz was hitting in the 4 hole for a couple weeks when things were going wrong with Howard. Yeah. So like we have seen different kind of creativity and mobility in that lineup kind of shift to get guys going. So I probably would have done that. Now, second one, and this is something that people have talked about fairly consistently, and it's something I love talking about. We're going to talk about it later this week on In Cap We Trust with another episode when I get Rob back on. But Cesar in the leadoff spot versus Cesar at 6, 7, or 8 this year. Clear difference. I mean, you mentioned he got himself up to 310. And, he does see a lot of pitches. He is able to walk. He does have sneaky power for a pretty thin guy. Would you flip-flop him and Kingery and kind of mess with what you have with Kingery in the back end right now? I know that he's not your prototypical leadoff hitter. I really don't give a shit about that. I think that the game has changed. But curious to see where you would go with that in order to kind of get Cesar going.
I probably would. My only fear there is does that get in Kingery's head at all? I mean, not that you can assume it would, but I mean, look at what it did to Cesar.
Sure.
Moving him 6-1, you don't want to get Kingery out of a spot where he's comfortable. However, I mean, if I was Gabe Kapler, I think I would try that out. I think Kingery would be great as a leadoff hitter. I know you said he's not your prototypical leadoff hitter, but yeah, who cares? He's been awesome. I don't see why not. Snag
him an extra AB, each night. I think it's great for Kingery. I think it's great for the lineup. And I think one of the things you had mentioned, will this get in his head, or how can we assume or not assume that this will affect positively or negatively Scott Kingery? Just like we mentioned, he went on the IL. You assumed coming back he would take a little bit of time to work back into things. He just picked the bat up and just kept on raking. That to me says that there is an approach and like a confidence level that he has in himself right now that I don't know that it matters if he's hitting 1, 2, 5, 6, or 7. I think his approach would remain fairly consistent there. And it's something that I would try. If the offense finds itself in a rut again, that might be my first move, probably even before moving Hoskins anywhere.
Yeah, I agree there. Yeah.
All right. You have any other some downers on the year right now? Some negative surprises that you've kind of gone through?
So Aaron Nola has been really bad.
Yes.
I mean, I think we all might have been a little naive if we expected similar production to last year, because I think last year he was just unreal, but for him to take this many steps back has been pretty scary to see. I mean, you look at some of the numbers, he's walking 4 guys per 9 innings, giving up 9.6 hits per 9, 1.4 home runs per 9. His whip is 1.5. I mean, he's letting a lot of guys get on base, and his ERA is just under 5. He's just he's not the same guy as last year. He's averaging less than 6 innings per start. He's not been reliable. He's certainly not been an ace. So I mean, it's been pretty bad to see.
It's been difficult. I sit here and I've been on the side that's pretty much argued against whatever the popular thing to say about Aaron Nola was. But when it does come down to it, he has not been good this year. And when games like last night, now thank God we won last night, but games like last night are where you truly need your ace to be your ace. And Aaron Nola was just not good. Not good last night. And it's weird. I think that you've tweeted about it. I know that Alex has tweeted about it a bunch. You take a look at him and his velocity's there. His movement's there. It's not quite as sharp as it was the previous year. His spin's not quite there, but it's still respectable enough. To me, I can't tell if it's purely confidence in his stuff, if he just doesn't have the natural feel. So many balls are finding the way over the heart of the plate as opposed to scraping black like he was last year. And we've heard talks about the baseballs being changed, the seams being tighter. We've now learned that he really, really struggles in cold weather or, maybe not super great weather, which I think can be said for a lot of pitchers. Not everyone's going to be quite as sharp. But to take this many steps backwards, that's tough. I'm hoping that this is, hey, I've just signed my $11 million a year, $44 million over 4, whatever it was that he signed. First year, we do see a lot of guys in that first initial year of a contract, that rewarding contract, kind of press a little bit. And in the beginning of the year, he looked like he was pressing. Now, I think that he just looks lost. And I do think a big part of it as well is there are games where he gets to the 6th or 7th inning and he has only allowed the 1 or 2 runs. Now, he's pitched himself into jams, but out of them. And it kind of leaves it up to the bullpen or Gabe Kapler. And it seems like no matter what decision is made, it's the wrong one on those nights. Yes. Logic could support it. But if you leave Aaron Nola out there, he hangs something and gets himself into trouble. And next thing you know, what was a 6 or 7 inning outing for 2-3 runs is now 5 or 6 runs. And suddenly it looks like a terrible start. Or the bullpen, as we saw in Cincinnati, lets him down with Alvarez and then Vinny coming in there, and neither one of them being able to shut that down for him. Suddenly the inherited runners are scoring too. It seems like nothing is working in his favor. So I don't know that he can really catch a break right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned, whenever he gets a little deeper into starts, things will fall apart, whether he stays in or the bullpen comes in. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that he pitched 208, 209 innings last year.
Yes, most of his career.
I mean, yeah, so that I mean, it's like people have talked about. It's like 08 versus 09 Hamels. Hamels, same thing. Pitched more innings than he ever had. That's been a perfect
comparison.
Yeah, he pitched more than he ever had before in 08, and then he kind of stunk in 09. And you just hope that, I don't think anyone thinks this is who Aaron Nola is now, but you just hope that he can figure it out sooner than later, because the rotation, for the most part, has been super inconsistent, and not having your ace pitch like this is not going to help. And on that note, the one last disappointment I wanted to go into is Jake Arrieta. The thing about Arrieta, before the season started, I thought he was going to be bad because he was really bad second half of last year. And then everything started coming up about how he tore his meniscus, and he was pitching on that. So they were going to figure that out, and he was healthy again and all this stuff. So then, he looked really good in spring training, looked really sharp. And I think I did, and a lot of other Phillies fans started to be a little more confident in his stuff and what he could be this season. And he was good for about 5 starts, and since then he has just been really bad. In his last 9 games started, he has a 5.4 ERA. And he's just getting crushed. He's giving up a lot of home runs, walking a lot of guys. It's not striking guys out. It's kind of like last year. It just has not been encouraging.
He's another one, and look, he could end up turning in a late June into early July where he runs 5-6 starts together, where he looks like not the Jake Arrieta of old, but a competent number 2 or 3 starter. he's so hard to figure out, and it's weird because his velocity was a tick up this year to start the year, which was encouraging. And we did kind of all chalk it up to, hey, he was pitching hurt last year. He was pitching without a spring training last year. That was a unique year for Jake Arrieta in terms of, how he was able to prepare. This year, coming in healthy, having a full spring training, looking very good in spring training, added some of the velocity back that he had lost. His ball looked like it was moving. He was starting to miss bats again early on in the season, and then it just all crashed down again. And as bipolar as anything I've ever seen in my entire existence, any time out, I believe that he could end up going 6-7 innings again and pitching 2 runs or less and looking, like a really good pitcher. So he's very, very frustrating.
Yeah. Yep.
So, all right, real quick. So we've heard this question thrown around a lot too. Wild card game tomorrow. You have Nola, Pivetta, or Eflin. Who do you go to?
Eflin.
Yeah, me too. I know a lot of people sit there and they like knowing your ace is on the hill with Aaron Nola, but he has not been the ace of the staff right now. And then there's a ton of, and we're both big Pivetta guys. There's a ton of intrigue on him, and what he's been able to do in his last 4 starts since coming back has been incredibly impressive, especially some of the offenses that he has faced. But there's that unknown uncertainty with him. There's just something very calming about Eflin right now.
Yep. And I mean, ask me again in a month. Who knows? Pivetta keeps this up. I don't know.
He truly has the only swing and miss stuff on the staff.
Yep. Yeah. He's been, and he's finally put it together. Like you said, the past 4 starts, it's just a matter of, can he keep it up? Can he stay out of his own head? And I guess we'll see.
For sure.
But
yeah, one of those. Go ahead.
I was going to say that may be a dilemma that Kapler will have to face is who's going to pitch the wild card game, because I don't know if the Phillies don't win the division, that's who knows.
I don't know. He may just go with an opener. Who knows?
Yeah.
No, I trust him, 100% to make the correct decision. But it's not going to be an easy one, and obviously, we have 90 some games left, before we have to really consider stuff like that. But still an interesting thought, interesting question there. Yeah. So one thing that I notice on Twitter, and anyone else who follows you on Twitter, which by the way is at Jonny Heller, correct?
Yes.
All right,
yep.
It's with 2 N's, no H. We got no thing about that before. But you probably more so than most of the people on Phillies Twitter that I follow, you always put up interesting statistics and interesting things that have happened this year. One of my favorite things that it's something that you recognize, but you don't recognize the severity of it, was the Eichhoff thing, that the last 27 innings pitched, or 27 and a third, he let up 16 home runs and 27 runs in those 27 innings. Why don't you give us some of your most eye-popping stats or weird things that you've found throughout this season thus far?
Yeah, so I tried to touch on some of them as I was going through the some of the players and stuff. I'll bring back up a couple of them. For Kingery, it's the exit velo. So last year he had an 85.5 mile per hour exit velo, which ranked toward the bottom of the league. This year, 90.2, and he's barreling the ball 2 times the amount. He had 5.1% barrel percentage last year, 10.7 this year. I just think that is unreal. Just polar opposites right there.
Absolutely.
To not be hitting the ball hard at all last year, and then to do what he has this year. Let's see what else I got.
You put up a player comparison. I think you've done 2 of them in the last day or so. Why don't you give us the numbers on each of those, if you have your Twitter available?
Yeah, I'm pulling up my Twitter right now. Here's another one real quick. Rhys Hoskins in his last 122 at bats has 10 extra base hits. Scott Kingery in his last 35 at bats has 10 extra base hits. I think that's just insane.
New 4-hole hitter.
Yeah, right. Honestly. So the player comparison I put up this morning, it's actually Nola versus Arrieta, and so the reason I put it up is I think that I mean, people have talked about how bad Nola has been, but it's always been, oh, he'll figure it out. Or for a lot of people, it's been, oh, he'll figure it out. Like, I trust him, he's the ace. And then for Arrieta, it's been, oh, get this guy off the team, right? And I put up their numbers. I mean, they have very similar stats. And Arrieta, 14 games, 86 innings pitched. Nola, 15 games, 81 innings pitched. So, and Arrieta's got a 4.31 ERA. Nola's got a 4.89 ERA. So Arrieta's edging Nola some of those stats, and then Nola more strikeouts, less home runs, but they both have whips around 1.5. So I mean, that was just really trying to point out how bad both of those guys have been this year. And then the one I put up yesterday,
it does surprise me with that too. Just as you're finding your second comparison, Arrieta obviously has a longer track record of being a true professional pitcher, a top of the rotation guy over the last 6, 7, 8 years. Aaron Nola for the longest time was always thought to be a middle of the rotation guy, and I just wonder, had last year not been to the massive amount of success that Nola was able to see, had he just been great but not Cy Young category great, would we be so quick to say, Nola will figure this out, Jake certainly can't, or would it be flip-flopped?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely an interesting question. Obviously, part of it was Arrieta. With Arrieta is the age and the player option next year. I mean, people understandably don't want that $20 million going to Jake Arrieta next year.
Sure.
But yeah, agreed. It's definitely interesting how Phillies fans kind of view the two in completely different lights, even though they're having pretty similar seasons in terms of just being completely ineffective.
Yes.
And so the second player comparison, it has to do with Eflin. So Eflin this year, 13 games, 80 innings pitched, 2.81 ERA, 3.47 strikeouts per walk, 1.1 WHIP. He's allowed 11 home runs. So the second guy, this is a former Phillies pitcher. In his first 13 games, he had 91 innings pitched, so a little more than Eflin. 3.36 ERA, so a bit higher than Eflin. 2.81 strikeouts per walk, which is a little worse than Eflin, and then a 1.065 WHIP, a little better than Eflin, but all of those around the same, and that's 08 Hamels. So I just think I'm not trying to say Eflin's doing what 08 Hamels did or anything like that. I'm just trying to point out he has been really, really good. I mean, he's been at least a number two. I mean, you could argue he's definitely been, I don't want to say the word ace, but he has been the ace of the staff. So yeah, and like you were saying, I like to throw out those stats and everything. And I mentioned to you, I'm writing for Phillies Nation, and right now the only articles I'm writing, one at the end of every series, and in those articles I'm putting 3 numbers from the series just to kind of show like how a player is trending after that series, stuff like that. So anyone listening, check that out if you're into numbers. I think it's a good way to kind of gauge how guys are doing. So yeah,
for sure. And again, if you are listening, it is at Jonny Heller on Twitter as well. So even if you don't have the time to sit there and read entireties of articles for Phillies Nation, which by the way you should do, they have a lot of great writers. We've had a few of them on here. But if you're just randomly looking through Twitter and you want to be really interested with some numbers and trends and stat lines, Jonny Heller is definitely something to follow there. Provides a lot of interesting content, a lot of content we use on our show, John. I don't know if you know that, but
I did not.
Yeah, but some of our stuff between you, Alex, and Jack, I think you fuel our NCAP We Trust interesting tidbits that we bring in throughout most of our shows. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
So all right, before we get into kind of the state of the NL East, which is the real reason that you're here, that is a little bit extensive of a talk on our first 70 games here, but it was necessary. What's your most encouraging win? And it may very well have been last night's win, but most encouraging win for this Philadelphia Phillies team this year?
Yeah, it's definitely last night. After that brutal loss on Friday, and then last night Nola gives up that home run, and the offense is dead for 3 or 4 innings heading into the ninth. I mean, for them to pull that out, really, really impressive. I mean, that would have been just another deflating loss had they have lost it, and just to turn it around in the ninth like that, it's really, really good to see.
Yeah, and it's turned around by, Cesar, a guy who's been, just ice cold, and then putting in Hector, a guy who, as we mentioned, Friday night, that was a really, really tough loss to swallow. Stallness actually tweeted out this morning or last night that it was potentially a season-saving victory. Now, I don't necessarily believe that you can say any single game in June is a season-saving or a season-defeating win or loss. But I do think that is probably the closest you can come. A division rival, you're now behind them in the seedings for NL East standings. That was about as big of a win as you can come across right now in a midseason game.
Yeah, if they lose that game, they're 3.5 out of first place, and that's big difference between that and 1.5.
Certainly.
I mean, yeah.
So we mentioned the next about month of baseball, 26, 27 games as we entered the Braves series, is against NL East opponents. So we're going to talk probably a little bit longer about the Braves since they are kind of the class of the NL East right now. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the other teams in competition. But for the Braves, this is a team, entering into this season that has been white hot. They are a gritty team that just finds a way to win in 7th, 8th, and 9th innings. We saw it on Friday night. They are professional hitters with great approaches. They all seem to hit like Freddie Freeman right now. They all seem to be able to protect and just throw the bat head out and have just that great of bat to ball skills. And things just find holes, whether they're putting it, like I said, whether they're putting it 5-6 rows deep on some of those home runs or whether they're blooping singles out there, and odd gapping doubles. It's just a very, very good team. What do you kind of attribute most of their success to? Is it more so that really strong offense and deep offense, or is this a surprising rotation that they have going on over there?
I attribute it to the offense. Obviously, last year they won the division behind that offense. And I think when they signed Josh Donaldson in the offseason, it was a little bit confusing because they did have really good production from third base last year. But now you put Donaldson at third and the team becomes that much deeper. And it's a really deep lineup. They have a pretty good bench. They've had good production this year from their bench. Their lineup has undoubtedly been more impressive than the Phillies, which I don't know who was necessarily expecting that to be the case coming into the season. And while you said, right, their starting pitching has been pretty good, especially from a couple guys in particular. But, I mean, their lineup has just been, like you said, white hot, especially of late. I think they're, 21-9 in their last 30, something along those lines. When they've caught up all that ground to the Phillies, they've been hitting the ball all over the place.
Yeah, an incredibly deep team, and they're a team that doesn't really seem susceptible to any type of streakiness. Whereas you mentioned the Philadelphia Phillies have been just a series of streak right now. This Braves lineup is deep enough that they can hurt you, 1 through 8, 1 through 9, any given night, and it seems like they never really have two guys cold at once. So it's been really, really impressive to watch for anyone that has been following the Braves, closely. And then that pitching staff, like we mentioned, they are surprisingly good this year. And they're only going to get stronger. So they do have a pretty decent defense over there as well. And they just obviously signed Dallas Keuchel, a pitch-to-contact ground ball pitcher that is supposedly going to be ready in the next, 10 to 14 days to already be up and join that rotation. That's a lot of pressure on the Philadelphia Phillies right now to sit here and compete with, an offense that does not go cold and a starting rotation that already hands down has you beat, and now is adding another quality arm with pretty good defense behind it. How concerned are you with the impact of this Keuchel signing?
A lot of I don't know about you, but a lot of the Phillies fans I follow on Twitter were kind of mocking the whole Dallas Keuchel acquisition, but I mean, it's only going to help the Braves. Even if Keuchel isn't, a great pitcher, even if people think he's a little overrated, he's still a professional pitcher. He won a Cy Young 3 years ago. And like you said, their infield defense is really good, and he's a ground ball pitcher. That's only going to help. And in addition, who knows? Mike Fultonowicz has been terrible this year, and if he starts pitching like he did last year, and then all of a sudden they have 4, maybe 5 really, really good pitchers, because Teheran and Mike Soroka have already been relatively unhittable this year. So yeah, I mean, if I'm the Phillies, I'm definitely concerned. Their line is already out hitting us, and all of a sudden their rotation is all of a sudden formidable, like super formidable. It's concerning. I think they're definitely a better team than the Phillies right now.
So we'll definitely talk about it shortly in a few points, but knowing that the Braves have gone out and tackled another starting pitcher that you mentioned, that this guy could go 6, 7, 8 innings every single night, and you're always going to be in the ball game, or at least you're assuming that with Keuchel. And then, like we said, 3, 4 their current rotation pieces have been really, really good this year, like really, really good. They didn't start that way, but they have certainly gotten, hot over the last, 30, 40 days. Does it change your approach at all to the trade deadline? Are you more or less aggressive?
I don't think what the Braves have done should change the approach. I think what should change the approach is the fact that everyone's hurt on the Phillies, and this season you don't approach this season like it's win now or never win, especially since it's pretty obvious they're a tier below the Dodgers, probably a tier below the Brewers. So I don't know if it's necessarily the Braves, just the Braves, that should discourage them from making those win now moves. I think it's more everything kind of collectively, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much on the same page with that. And like I said, we'll talk a little deadline talk shortly as well. But while talking on the Braves, felt it was a relevant question there.
Yes.
You had mentioned there right before, I had asked that we don't necessarily stack up super well with the Braves right now, whether that be pitching or whether that be our offense. With a full slate of healthy pieces, and looking at the Braves coaching staff versus our coaching staff, looking at that full picture, we're healthy in the middle of June, whatever it may be. We have 4 or 5 of those bullpen arms back. We know, even if it's just Hazley back in center field, and which allows Scott Cameron to play third base, and say we find a right-handed bat to platoon Bruce with out there and left. So say some of these things happen. Do you still feel that even just looking at talent alone, that they're a step ahead of us right now? Or would you feel that we're probably a little bit more even-keeled once we get healthy?
That's a tough question. I'd have to say that they're still a little bit ahead, but that's also contingent on Aaron Nola still pitching like this, Jake Arrieta still pitching like this.
Sure.
If all of a sudden Aaron Nola was 2018 Aaron Nola, I'd feel differently. But I mean, like we agreed, their lineup has been really consistent, and even the Phillies lineup at full strength still pretty streaky, and their rotation has been pretty good. I'd say the Braves would still be a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's not to say that I'm not confident in what the Philadelphia Phillies could do this year, but a lot would really have to trend in a different direction than it has. But let's take a look at the rest of the NL East now. I was going to start this with the Nats because they're to me a more relevant conversation, but I'm going to go ahead and start with the Mets purely because the last time we had you on, you said that you felt as though the Mets were going to be the biggest threat to the Philadelphia Phillies this year. And how's that working out?
Not too good.
Not too good.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna. It's tough to sit there because I'm kind of there with you. I love the Mets Phillies rivalry. I think it's one of the best in sports, but I also genuinely love when they just look like a dumpster fire. Like they both bring me similar levels of satisfaction, and I don't really know that one necessarily trumps the other. So this has been interesting for me thus far.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree there. Both are definitely very interesting, or very fun watching them lose and watching them, be it right up there with the Phillies. But I think when I made that prediction, I think I kind of forgot that they were the Mets, and that even if they put together a solid roster with a big upside, they're never going to reach that upside because they're the Mets. Like, obviously, they're just not hitting, and the rotation hasn't been terrible, but it hasn't been great. Syndergaard and DeGrom have both underperformed, and Vargas has been their best pitcher, which
is hilarious. That guy is ageless.
Yeah. So I mean, go ahead.
Not a whole lot there with the Mets that should concern us. That being said, I do always feel like there is something about divisional play that it genuinely does not matter how much better a team very well may be or how much hotter a team may be. Anything can happen in these divisional play. So with that thought in mind, what does scare you the most about the Mets before we move on to the Nats here?
Well, I mean, first of all, Phillies Mets games. It's just been really weird. They always kind of go haywire, and we always seem to lose those games in devastating fashion, or win the occasional game. So I don't know. I mean, I think the Phillies will probably get shut out a couple times by Jason Vargas, and they always seem to hit Syndergaard pretty well. But so the problem last year, I think the Phillies and Braves had pretty identical records, other than against the Mets and the Marlins. And the Braves killed the Mets and the Marlins, and the Phillies played roughly 500 ball. So when the Phillies play the Mets, who are, I think, pretty clearly an inferior team because they cannot hit at all, other than Pete Alonso, who's ridiculous, but
he's filthy.
I mean, yeah, he's been insane. But the Phillies need to win those games, and have they played 2 series against the Mets?
2
this year? Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen them play in a while, so I'm definitely intrigued to see. I mean, our pitching staff, the Phillies pitching staff has been pretty bad, but can they get the Mets out who can't hit? I mean, it's
weird. So the last time our staff was kind of collectively hitting a little bit of a bump there, we were heading into Miami. And we were all sitting there thinking, oh, this is exactly what the doctor ordered. This is what Pivetta needs. This is what Eflin needs. This is what each of these guys needed who pitched in that series. I think it was Arrieta was the other one that went in that series in Miami. And I do worry that at seeing a Mets offense that is just so stagnant and just not scary at all. I worry that if an Aaron goes in there and gets lit up, if Arrieta goes in there and gets lit up, if Pivetta reverts and goes back to Pivetta of 5 weeks ago, just how damaging that could be for a confidence that already has to be shaky in that rotation room there. Yeah,
no, I definitely agree there. It's definitely important for those guys who have struggled to. I mean, it could be a great, like you said. I mean, Miami should have been a great kind of confidence boost for these guys, but it wasn't, and the Mets should be too, but who knows?
Divisional play.
Maybe, yeah. Robbie Cano probably hit 6 home runs in the series or something because it's the Mets. I don't know.
Oh, well, while on Miami there, another team who's actually played really, really good baseball lately. They have a lot of young pieces there that are certainly intriguing. They're a team that you obviously you can't really trust to sustain success, at least not at this point in their kind of forever rebuild. But they're interesting nevertheless, and with some of those young power arms there, they do concern me, probably a little bit more than what either the Mets or the Nats do, as odd as that sounds. I don't know if you're on that wavelength too or not.
In terms of playing them, yes. Because pitchers like who the Marlins have, our guys never seem able to hit. In terms of, like you said, they're not going to sustain this. I'm not scared of them in terms of a division threat for the next 3 years, probably. Maybe not that long. This year, next year. But I mean, I definitely could see the Phillies struggling against them in games for the rest of this year, just because, like you said, their pitching staff has been really, really good, and they have a lot of really good young arms.
Yeah, for sure. They're like I said, just a really interesting follow right now. I'm a big prospect guy. I'm a big young player type of guy. I like to see the development of the next wave of talent in Major League Baseball, and teams like Miami are always going to filter those guys in, because they have no budget, no anything. They just come on up and play and figure it out, and there's something oddly satisfying about that. So they are, like I said, an interesting team to follow right now. And I will be curious to see how the Phillies stack up against them, because we don't play them well. We do not hit their starting rotation very well. So it'll be interesting to see. But record-wise, and kind of similar to the Braves, just without a bullpen, is the Nats. They do have a talented offense, and their starting rotation when right is really, really good. We have a handful of guys that handle Scherzer, which is encouraging. We have a handful of guys that handle Strasburg, but overall he kind of has the Phillies number. I don't necessarily feel Corbin, kind of is what it is. But in terms of the Nats, what are some of the things that your keys to a series or the next several series with the Nationals?
I mean, their bullpen has been a dumpster fire. So, I mean, like you said,
keep it close and pray.
Yeah, keep it close, right? Like you said, some of our guys have been able to hit Scherzer, and Strasburg usually shuts us down. But just keeping it close and getting that bullpen early, the lineup is the Phillies lineup is known for working guys. So you work those guys, get them out of the game early. Get to that bullpen. And their lineup has been good, not great. Anthony Rendon has been like MVP level good, and Juan Soto's been pretty good again. But other than that, it's been pretty average. Other than Howie Kendrick, who is the best second baseman in baseball all of a sudden. But
I love Howie Kendrick.
But yeah, I'm not really scared of the Nationals. I think, like you said, their rotation is pretty good. Corbin's been bad since late April. I think he's got an ERA over 5 since the start of May.
Who could have seen that coming?
Right. And then Anibal Sanchez. I mean, honestly, you look at a series between the Phillies and the Nationals, you probably get back-to-back games where the Phillies beat up Scherzer and then get no hit by Anibal Sanchez, because that's how this lineup is. So yeah, I mean, I'm not that scared of games against the Nationals.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, tons of interesting matchups and interesting series, especially over this month with nothing but NL East play. Like I said, entering the Braves series, it was 26 or 27 straight against the NL East. Quick recap: it's Atlanta leading the division right now, 41-30. Game and a half behind them is the Philadelphia Phillies at 39-31. The Mets are 34-36, 6.5 out. Washington is 32-38, 8.5 out. And Miami is 25-43, 14.5 out. Now, again, records are not always indicative of success within division play. There have been many seasons where the Philadelphia Phillies are, the class or among the class of the NL East, and we struggle with the Miami Marlins team that is just dog shit. So, it is always interesting to see some of the matchups here and how things trend. Go ahead.
What was that?
I thought you were saying something. My fault.
No, you're good.
I may very well have feedback in these headphones right now. But we are also approaching deadline season, and this is going to be an incredibly interesting deadline, to say the least, for the Phillies. There's a couple schools of thought. There's one that says, fuck it, let's break the luxury tax in year one, which I'm kind of against. For all the reasons that you said, we are too many moves away from the Dodgers, from the Brewers, really kind of just the Dodgers and Brewers, but you could kind of throw the Braves in there right now. We're just too many things away. So I myself would not press into that luxury tax. So then the other side is, let's get really creative. Let's find other ways that we can kind of Jay Bruce teams, right? Let's see how we can, see what GMs are looking to get rid of, I don't want to say diamonds in the rough kind of players, but players that kind of fit our specific need that may not necessarily fit all of baseball's need. So with that in mind, first of all, what is your stance? You a luxury tax? Let's just break the bank this year. Let's just fuck it and go ahead and do it and go ahead and get a Greinke type of pitcher? Or are you more, let's get creative. Let's see what we can do first?
I'd say I'm somewhere in the middle. I think the luxury tax is something that owners use as an excuse not to spend money, but it really doesn't matter that much. And
until you become the Nationals and you can't afford anything.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't want to just go way over, have zero regard for you don't want to spend recklessly, but at the same time, I don't want them to use it as an excuse not to get better. But like you said, they're not going to get better than the Dodgers or the Brewers by acquiring one of those guys like a Zach Greinke this year. So it's probably not the time to do it. But the idea of just plugging holes, I'm not all for that either, because I just don't think it really works. You saw it last year. They got Justin Bour and Asdrubal Cabrera and Wilson Ramos, and that didn't really do anything. I just think it's a waste. Sure, if it doesn't cost anything, might as well, but I just don't think that those moves are the type of moves that will really make a team better. And I just think you have to really give something up to get something. I think a Jay Bruce like move, you're not gonna find that a lot.
Sure. So let's go with a few prospects here. So again, I'm a big prospects guy. There are a handful of guys on my list that I would really like to not move. Is there anyone within the system right now that you would not include in a trade for somebody?
So this is a tough question for me, because I think prior to the JT Realmuto trade, I would have said Sixto Sanchez is untouchable for me. But then, trade him, and JT Realmuto's been a pretty great player, and I just think I'm with you in that I do enjoy looking at the prospects and seeing what we have, and the like Alec Boehm. Of course you want to hold on to him, but I'm not entirely. My whole stance is I don't think anyone should be untouchable, because if the right trade comes up, I wouldn't move Alec Boehm unless it was, I don't even know what player I would move Alec Boehm for. But I'm not going to sit here and say, I'm not moving this guy for anyone. I think there should be a list of untouchable guys for, 1 or 2 year rentals. But if you're moving Alec Boehm in a trade for a young pitcher who's on contract for the next 4 years, then you might have to do it. So that's pretty much my stance on that. Yeah, you got to give something up to get something up. And even if it's your top prospect, if you're getting a really good major league player who's on contract for a few years, then I think you do it.
That's interesting, and I don't think a lot of people really think that way. And one thing that I would encourage people who do not think that way, I myself am also this person, not many prospects, I mean, truly, it might just be Carrasco over the last 15 years, really, for us that we've shipped out have truly amounted to sustained success in major league careers. And it goes to show you that prospects truly are just that. They are an unknown, uncertain bit of talent that can you unlock at the major league level. And the Phillies really have not had a very good player development system in years and years and years. Yeah. So it is interesting to sit there and think, you know what, there is not a single person in the system right now that is an untouchable. And it does breed a different line of thinking there, at the deadline. So that's interesting. And I'm glad you mentioned it and put it that way. Like I said, I'll reevaluate the deadline with that thought in mind now as well. And hopefully our listeners do too. You can play both sides of the coin here at the deadline. If you had it your way, we have very obvious holes right now. Obviously, you want to improve the rotation. We're going to get a lot of help back in the bullpen right now, but you can always add there. And then our bench is atrocious, and we assume that once an outfield piece gets kind of locked in place, that slides Kingery to third, and we assume that is fixed. But if you had your choice of starting pitcher that is available or that's name's been mentioned, a bullpen arm or two, and a couple bench players or outfielders, or however you would kind of work it, who are the names that you are most likely to target right now?
Yeah, so I have a few names in terms of starting pitchers. So one guy I think people haven't really been talking about, and I'm not really. I kind of know why, because he's a really weird guy. Trevor Bauer. So he signed through the end of next year. And while I think the Indians aren't out of it, I think they're going to trade him because he's going to be in his third year of arbitration, and they're going to have to pay him a pretty substantial amount of, and they're not going to want to do that because they're really cheap. So they're going to trade him. I'd have to see what the return is like for him, but I think the Phillies should be in on him because he is really good. I have no interest in Madison Bumgarner. I think a lot of people have kind of shared that thought. The idea of a expensive 1-year rental is just not something I think that this team should explore. Same thing with Will Smith.
So before you move on the Bumgarner thing, and this is something that we've talked about on our show a handful, and I don't know how many other people sit here and have really discussed this. With Madison Bumgarner, now prior to the season, we all sat there and we assumed he was the target, the guy. We all had dreams of him and Nola in October and just how dominant that could be. Obviously, Madison Bumgarner has not been what we have known him to be. Justin Verlander, his last couple of years in Detroit, kind of started to teeter off. Those teams were bad. There wasn't a lot of energy in the crowd. It was almost a toxic-like environment. They have a new GM over there who is brilliant. Don't get me wrong. That team is not winning anytime soon in San Francisco. Would a move to a major market team that is in very much so win now or win in the very, very near immediate future kind of re-energize and reignite a career like Madison Bumgarner? He is still, he's nearing 30, but not yet there. We have seen pitchers kind of reinvent themselves and their stuff and learn to pitch with different velocities and different spins and kind of, like I said, reignite and re-energize their career. Do you think that a move to Philadelphia for a pitcher like Madison Bumgarner could do that? Or do you think that he's a little too hard-headed and quirky, whereas Verlander seems a little bit, he's quirky in his own right, but he seems certainly more calm than what someone like a Madison Bumgarner would be?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that I don't think I've thought about a lot. The thing that scares a lot of people on Bumgarner, myself included, is he's just getting hit hard. It's not he's been unlucky. I think Corey Seidman tweeted the other day that he has the highest exit velocity against, or barrel percentage, one of those things. He's just getting hit hard. I think his velo is down. So like you said, Verlander was able to kind of turn it around at a pretty late age, but I wouldn't trade for Bumgarner counting on that to happen with him. And like you said, he's kind of a quirky guy, kind of a hard-headed guy. And not that this would really factor in my decision either, but I think he would probably hate Gabe Kapler. Just kind of knowing he's a very kind of old school baseball guy, Bumgarner is, and I don't know how he would feel about some of the decisions Kapler makes and the way he kind of goes about managing the team. I just wouldn't send a top prospect for half a year of Bumgarner, even.
Yeah, I wouldn't also. If this price was right for us, it would be something I would jump on for the intrigue of the possible re-sign. I also definitely believe that someone will overpay him in his next contract, and I would very much so like that to not be Philadelphia.
No, yeah.
That being said, if we were to acquire him at the deadline and he was to pitch himself into a worthy contract, I'd feel certainly much different. But it's something that we've played around with here at AMYP a lot, sitting here and saying, is he the type of pitcher that could have that second life in Verlander-esque fashion as he has done in Houston, in a major market such as Philadelphia, in a winning environment? Again, we saw how dominant he was when that team was good. So, it's something interesting that we've again continually talked about, and I'm sure we'll talk about it well beyond the deadline. But you were mentioning other names, and I cut you off. Go ahead.
All right. So I just wanted to, while I was touching on Bumgarner, I wanted to touch on Will Smith. I'm also not interested in Will Smith because I think he's going to be too expensive. He's a premier lefty, and his contract expires, so he's a rental, and someone's going to have to give up something very nice to get him. And I just don't think that's worth it for the Phillies. If the Phillies were to trade for a rental, I'd rather it be someone like, I don't think they should go after elite rentals. Kind of some of the cheaper guys, like a Jake Diekman. I wouldn't mind bringing him back. He's been okay in Kansas City, and
everyone can be okay in Kansas City.
Well, that is fair. I always like Jake Diekman though, and he has been pretty good the past couple years since I think he got his colon removed and he was out for a year or something, and he's been pretty good since he came back. So someone like him, that's the kind of guy I'm renting, just because our bullpen is so many guys have gone down. But in terms of kind of a longer term piece, I'm looking at Brad Hand, who I think is signed through 2022. He's going to cost a lot, but He has been really good and he is really cheap. And then, Ken Giles, another guy they could look at bringing back.
Absolutely not bring back Ken Giles. He is a goddamn head case. I just think Philadelphia is a place that will destroy him at this point in his career.
I will say I would not trade for Ken Giles and count on him to be, a ninth inning guy or a closer. But I don't know. I wouldn't be against bringing him back. Shane Green on the Tigers, he's going to cost a lot. And I think he's signed through 2020. I would look at him. He's another guy. I mean, he's not a rental, but he's not signed to a 3-year contract, So those guys that you have to give up so much for, and you only have them signed a year and a half, that's a tough move to make. I think for a team like the Phillies that they're not there, So those are some of the pitching names I have. And you mentioned in terms of the outfield and the bench. I'm thinking strictly rental. Adam Jones, Gerard Dyson, one of those kinds of players who can hit, come off the bench. Can, like you said, if you need a righty platoon with Bruce. Although I guess if you only get one of those guys, then you don't have a righty platoon with Bruce until Hazley comes back.
Yeah, I was going to say you could in theory, but Hazley should be back in a matter of weeks.
Pretty soon, yeah. Really anything that they can do to get Franco off this baseball team, I think is a move worth making because, it's just been a black hole at third base. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about that.
I am very pro having him off the field and out of Phillies pinstripes. So I support that as well. Um, but like we've said, this is a team that has just been enamored by injuries all year. People who are screaming for Gabe Kapler's head over bullpen usage. Well, he's got no one to use. The guys that he is using, he has to run into the ground, which is obviously not good. You have a situation like a Neris the other night. Or Alvarez in the Nola start in Cincinnati. Like, these things will happen. We get these guys back. We get Hazley back. It does make that deadline a little easier and probably a little bit more cost effective in terms of dollars and in terms of prospect loss. So again, this will be a really interesting follow over the next 6 weeks, leading into the deadline there. But Jonny, dude, it's been great having you on. You have any final thoughts for us here?
Final thoughts. All right, my final thought is the ball is juiced except for when the Phillies are at bat, apparently. It doesn't make any sense. They're not hitting home runs, and they're allowing plenty of them, but they're not hitting them, and I just don't get it.
So someone obviously has to answer for that, and so High Hopes Pod talked about this too. John Malley. Someone has to answer for the failures of really, really great offenses, or perceived great offenses who are just really underperforming and just overall underwhelming. We saw it with the Philadelphia Phillies in 2008, 9, 10, what was this? I guess 9 or 10 that they got rid of Milt Thompson there. When you had Howard and Utley, and I think it was Raul Ibanez at the time, we had a lot of really talented offensive pieces there that were underperforming. The offense was inconsistent, and there was something that just lacked. And whether or not Milt Thompson truly had anything to do with it, somebody needed to answer for the failures of that. John Malley's fired 4, 5, 6 times over in his major league career as a hitting instructor. He is not bringing anything to this team by all likelihood. And I would love if sooner rather than later he is not the hitting coach of the Philadelphia Phillies, because I don't think that their identity is one thing. One of the things that I sit here and realize is, I'm fully on board with let's work pitchers, let's see as many pitches as we can, because you increase the likelihood of mistake pitches. But then you do have to train your hitters to gear up for a mistake pitch. Everyone's got to have a zone that's like, hey, if a ball comes here, I don't care where we're at in the count, I'm swinging at it. And they're not that way. Like, it's bizarre. They have the first part of the equation down, and then the second part, they're like, fuck it, we're just going to try to walk. And it's very, very strange. So I dig your baseball's juice, with the exception of Philadelphia. I think that Malley is dejuicing them himself. Trying to get fired.
I am with you there. Get him out of town. Yep.
Yeah, 100% agree. But yeah, Jonny, again, this was awesome having you on. For all of our listeners who have only heard you for the first time this time, since I guess it's been about 6-7 weeks since we last spoke. We have Jonny on every 30-35 games, and we try to do a state of the NL East. So, we'll kind of let you know where the standings are. We will definitely talk again at the end of this 26-27 game stretch against the NL East. So it'll be right around All-Star break time, and we'll have a lot more to discuss. I have a feeling this division is going to look very, very different, come that break. So I'm pretty excited about it. Jonny, where can all of our people find you at Twitter, if you want to spell out your handle for them?
That's at Jonny Heller, at JonnyHeller.
And you're currently writing for Phillies Nation. And what is their website? And do you have a specific blog section for you, or do they just search your name?
It's Phillies. Yeah, it's just philliesnation.com. I think you just have to search my name. But I'll have one out at the end of every series, just kind of recapping and spitting out some stats. So just stay tuned.
Awesome. And like I said, follow him on Twitter. Definitely keep up with some of those articles. And especially if you like our show, he is fueling a lot of our content. And Jonny, again, we thank you. Again, Again, we'll see you in about a month, and we'll have another In Cap We Trust State of the NL East edition. But that has been it for this episode of In Cap We Trust here at the Always Next Year podcast. We're going to turn it over to the Jackdaws here to sign us out.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
This has been a production of the Always Next Year Podcast Network. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, Spreaker, and SoundCloud. Please also remember to rate and review this podcast to validate our members' life choices. We appreciate it. This is AMYP, signing off.